Hi, Brian.
Hey, Ross.
So tell me, Brian,
Yeah.
where were you born?
I was born in New Jersey.
New Jersey.
I grew up in a town called Pompton Lakes, but I was born in Pompton Plains, or I think sometimes people called the part I was in Pequannock. Pequannock. Yeah.
What did you do there in Pequannock?
When? I was a baby
Growing
for
up.
a while.
Growing up.
Me? I was a kid. What do you mean, what did I do
What was your
as a
favorite thing
kid?
to do growing up? What you must have had a hobby or something.
I went to school. I mean, like, how old are we talking about?
I
Are you
don't
doing
know.
this chronologically? Did you prepare? Did you
God,
prepare
no.
for this? Can you be more specific?
Did you have any fun activities you used to do as a child?
At what age?
Age 3 to 7.
No, I was at A, I don't really remember. B, I was like 3 to 7 years old. So I did what kids do, stay inside,
Mm-hmm.
play computer games.
How were your parents?
How?
Mm-hmm.
Jesus, these are some hard-hitting questions.
Yeah.
They were great.
Yeah.
Do you want me to go into more detail
Yeah.
about that?
What were your parents like?
There we go. Nice specific question. You're just a regular Mark Maron, aren't you?
Mm-hmm.
So my dad owned a family clothing store called Wex Army and Navy, or just Wex, that his father started, I think, in the 30s.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom, and he worked there his whole life, his whole adult life. And my mom, before I was born, I'm the oldest of two,
Mm-hmm.
was a kindergarten teacher. And then when I was born, she quit that job, stayed home with me and my sister until my sister's 2.5 years younger, until we were, I don't know, pretty old, like probably till I was like 10 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then she also went to work at Wex store.
Were you close with your siblings?
My sibling. My
Oh,
sister.
sorry. I thought you said 2.
No, I'm the oldest of 2.
Oh, right. You're including yourself. I
Yeah.
apologize. So were you close with your sister?
Yeah, I mean, we were pretty different. I was a weird, nerdy kid, and she was like a punk rock kid. And as a teenager, so we hung out with very different crowds. We were spaced so that, like, we were 2.5 years in age, but like 3 years in school. So, like, for example, when I was a senior in high school, she was a freshman.
Mm-hmm.
So we would overlap in school and have the same teachers and stuff. But we hung out with very different crowds. I was definitely with the nerds, and she was with like the punk kids.
So calling yourself a nerd, does this mean that you had a pretty good idea that you wanted to get into science even at a young age? Or?
Oh yeah, I always liked science. I mean, I liked everything in school. It didn't really matter what it was.
But what
liked
drew
everything.
you to science in particular?
I just thought it was awesome. I mean, the physics I always really liked in particular because you could use math to talk about the universe, which I thought was pretty cool. I remember seeing a demonstration once. We were like holding like a rope or a slinky or something like that, and we would send waves. Like one person would hold one end and one person hold the other, and we'd send waves at each other, and you could see them add in the middle. It's called superposition. And then I saw that you could do that with actual sine waves.
Mm-hmm.
I was just blown away that was a thing that you could actually describe with math. Like,
So cool.
it works, I couldn't believe it. So I was probably in like 10th grade or something when that happened.
What was your school years like? Were they busy, fine, brutal, traumatic? What did you deal with?
They really weren't that traumatic. Like I went to a private day school in Montclair, New Jersey, which was like half an hour, 45 minutes from where I grew up in Pompton Lakes. So, and I went there kindergarten through 12th grade, through the end of high school, just because my parents didn't think the local schools were very good.
Interesting.
And that was called MKA, Montclair Kimberly Academy, kind of a pretentious name, but I had a great time there
Right.
as a student. My sister went there too.
When did you start playing piano or music in general?
Like piano was 2nd grade.
Right, so much earlier on.
And so very, very early. And then in 4th grade, I started saxophone because they made us pick up an instrument. And then sax became my main instrument, like all through.
Oh, you play saxophone. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, up until the end of college, sax was really my main instrument. In college, I did a lot of jazz stuff and, played almost no piano whatsoever, except
really?
just to write music. Yeah.
Huh.
And played alto sax and bari sax. Well, and tenor sax too when necessary.
Wow, interesting. So was music at all really a huge part of your like years in high school? Like did you actually had music as a subject and everything?
Oh yeah, we had I don't think that's a good question actually. I don't think we had separate like music classes, at least not in junior high, but we had concert band and that was a big part of my life. So I had a very influential mentor, this guy named Barry Santani, who was really just one of these guys who totally changed my life and was the first. He's like a professional musician. He was a percussionist, played on Broadway.
Right.
A really wonderful musician and just a genuinely sweet and awesome guy. And he was he was. I felt very close to a lot of teachers in high school because I was kind of a nerdy kid, and that's what I did. But Barry in particular was like this very influential figure.
Right. Was your high school close to your like hometown, or was it a bit of a drive? Or?
It was a drive, 30, 45 minutes.
Okay.
So we took a bus there.
Oh, interesting.
So it was far. I mean, for a kid, that's like a long drive to go every day, both ways. Half an hour. Once you're dropping a bunch of other kids off, it would sometimes be like an hour each way.
Do you think it was just like it was a good enough school that drive wasn't so, ridiculous? Or
I never questioned it really at the time, but why I ended up there. I think my cousin, my uncle lived next door to us.
Right. And
one of his sons, he had 4 sons. One of his sons went to this school. I think that's probably why my parents found out about it. I don't know if there was a better school closer or I actually have no idea what my parents' thought process was to put me and my sister there. But I think it was, hey, this guy next to us, my uncle's kid, goes there, so let's try it.
Huh. So what was the transition from high school to like college like for you, for instance? I mean, you clearly an academic straight out of the gate. So, I mean, was that just a no-brainer when you were moving to college? Total
no-brainer. I mean, I knew I wanted to go to college. It was never a question that I would. My parents were super supportive of it too. Both my parents had gone to college. Like it was just like, I don't know what they would have done if I had said, I don't want to go. They probably would have encouraged me, but it was no question. And they wanted to pay for it too.
Right.
Although we did take out I took out a bunch of loans for myself and then, got some grants and stuff like that. But it was I was just psyched to go to college. During my junior year, I guess summer of my junior year of high school, I did this thing in New Jersey called the Governor's School.
Right.
Where they they had it in different subjects. I actually don't know what the deal with it is now, but they had it in 4 different subjects at the time, one of which was science. And they took 100 students from the entire state and put you on a college campus for a month. Right. And you got to take classes. I mean, I took a programming class in Lisp, which is a kind of a programming language. I took a number theory class. I took a physics class in relativity. It's actually really what inspired me to go to study physics later. Cool. Is this thing I did in a summer program. But that experience of being on a college campus, like studying stuff that was, advanced for high school students, then I was just like, well, of course, college is the best.
Yeah, right.
And I applied to a bunch. For a while, I really wanted to go to MIT, and then actually got in there and applied to a bunch of other places.
Where'd you go in the end?
Williams College.
Okay, where's that exactly?
It's in far northwestern Massachusetts. So at the northwestern corner of Massachusetts, like the western border is New York and the northern border is Vermont, and it's right up in the corner. So it's literally like 5 minutes from New York, 5 minutes from Vermont if you go west or north.
That's interesting. Huh.
It's a great little school. It's about 2,000 undergraduates, and it's it's very academically rigorous, and
so it's more so like academic centric. Like, does it have a very strong science program there, or like? It's
yes, for a small liberal arts school. Right. So, for example, it has you can't get any kind of graduate degrees, really. There are a couple exceptions. They have I think a developmental economics master's or something, but there's no PhDs or anything. Right. It's just like undergraduate and entirely focused on undergraduate education. So you wouldn't get like some of the graduate level classes that you might get, at a big university, but they have amazing faculty in basically every department, sciences included. So yeah, it's an amazing place to study science, but you're not going to get in most cases, you don't get Nobel laureate researchers generally speaking. I don't think they have any Nobel laureates on faculty there. But you get these amazing scientists, some of whom are very well-known researchers, but generally it's people who are, Williams and many other schools like it try to go for good teaching as well as good research. And, in most research universities, they don't give a crap about teaching. So Williams, you get very good teachers and very good researchers.
So in college, did you have any extra activities you did? Were you part of a chess club? What did you do there other than the studies?
Well, music was a big part, but that was actually part of my degree too.
Right.
So I ended up doing, when I went to college, I wanted to do a double major in physics and philosophy.
Right.
And I quickly switched to math and music by my second year. Because at the time, this is not true anymore, but at the time the physics department wasn't so great and the math department was really great. So I did math instead. And I also, because I'd done a lot of math in high school and they let me switch into very advanced classes kind of right away.
Right.
So my freshman year I was taking junior level math classes, which was really fun. And that wasn't the case in physics. So I just went over to math where I could do more stuff. And philosophy, I took a year of it and really liked it, especially analytic philosophy, like kind of like philosophy of math, philosophy of language, that kind of stuff. Like Russell, Wittgenstein, people like Descartes, people like that. But for whatever reason, I just decided, well, I like music. I just wanted to do it more and took a couple more philosophy classes, but then switched to music. So most of my extracurriculars, quote unquote, were music, but in fact, they were just part of, I had to do them and wanted to do them as part of being a musician anyway.
Right.
Other than that, what did I do? Not too much extracurricularly. There was this one thing that happened once a semester, which was like a big campus-wide trivia contest, which I always loved doing.
Yeah, you good?
It was, you did it in teams, and my team would have like 30, 40 people on it. So
Good team?
It was a lot of fun. Yeah, it was, so what happened, there's some version of this that still exists, but it's, when I was there, the last day of classes, so before finals would start or anything, last day of classes, the team that won it the previous semester would take over the radio station.
Oh, cool.
And they would ask a question and play a song. And by the time the song was over, you had to call in with the answer to the question and the title and artist of the song.
Right.
The thing is now with, with when I was there, the internet wasn't really a thing. I mean, it was just starting.
Gotcha.
So I was in college I graduated in 97.
Okay.
So like we had browsers and I remember using Mosaic and early stuff like that.
God.
But there was no Google or, maybe there were some very early search engines, but
Alta Vista, Ask Jeeves.
yeah, not even Ask Jeeves that I remember.
Wow. Wasn't Ask Jeeves around back then?
It might have been around, but I didn't know how to use it.
Oh, okay. You just had to ask.
Yeah.
Was the big key.
And there was no one named Jeeves.
Oh, Jesus.
Actually, I'm sure there was someone named Jeeves at Williams. The one thing I remember is that there was a thing called the phonologue, which is like this massive book that the record stores had of like every recording ever. And so if you got in your request early enough, it was a really small town. So there was one record store. And if you reserved it ahead of time, you could get the phonologue and bring it to and it's like this thing that weighed, I don't know, like 100 pounds or something. This really heavy book. And so whichever team had the phonologue, they would be at a huge advantage for that trivia contest. Because if you knew part of the song, you could like look it up in the phonologue. You're like, oh, I think this is the title. You could look up by title and artist and stuff like that. So we always try to reserve the phonologue ahead of time.
Right. So, I mean, obviously you have a huge interest in music. You have a huge interest in science. Were there any, I guess, what was the big inspiration for you musically, and what was a big inspiration for you, either some sort of pop science person? Was there anything in science and music that really inspired you to keep moving forward on these things?
Musically, I mean, really the short answer is it was all faculty, it was all teachers that
inspired you.
That inspired me and that I respected, and then turned me on to music artists or composers or in physics. The way physics works, it's very hard. I don't know. I read, I'm trying to think what I read in high school. I didn't read like Hawking or Sagan or anyone read like that. I read a couple pop science books, but it was really just the academics itself that I really liked.
Yeah.
In music, my main thing in college was jazz. So I studied with this guy named Andy Jaffe, who was the jazz teacher at Williams. And he was, again, one of these guys who completely changed my life and was a huge inspiration, a brilliant piano player and composer. Right. And he turned me on to Duke Ellington, who is a lot of people think of Duke Ellington as the Take the A Train guy, but he's really an incredible composer and musician. And he wrote largely along with Billy Strayhorn, these beautiful, like very harmonically complex and interesting jazz big band pieces. So studying Ellington and the Ellington Orchestra or the various Ellington orchestras, I should say, was a big part of my my musical education, and that Ellington was a big inspiration to me musically.
So leaving college, what was your first year out of college like? Like, were you sucked when
Ass.
snatched up for?
So what happened to
work,
me after college? So my last year at college, I started dating this girl, and she was going to San Diego to do a PhD in economics, and I was going to go. Actually, I was going to go to Duke to do a PhD in music composition. But I didn't want to, not be with her. So actually, I dropped out of my music program. Ended up finding I was like, what the hell do I do? And I'd been looking at teaching high school too, because teaching at private high schools, you don't need to be certified. You can basically just get hired and start doing it. So I'd been talking to a few private high schools, like boarding school type places. And I found one of the ones that I'd been talking to had a job open up like late summer. Someone unexpectedly retired. It was in Western Connecticut at this school called the Kent School, which was a fine but not like amazing boarding school.
Right.
And they had a job, and I was like, okay, look, I'll take the job. My girlfriend, her name was Benny, was in San Diego, or going to San Diego. So that year I stayed in Connecticut teaching at a boarding school, like living in a dorm, teaching math. I was 22 at the time, and some of my students were like 19. So it was sort of this weird thing where I was not really that much older than they were.
Right.
And Benny was in San Diego to do starting her PhD in economics. And it was this really sucky year of, basically like I was in this dorm with a bunch of, 16, 17-year-olds, which is fine when you're 16 or 17 years old, but not when you're 22. It's a tiny town in Western Connecticut. There was nothing to do there. My girlfriend was across the country. Like it was just this, and because it was a year after college, right? Like, so all these friendships that I had were totally, everyone was just thrown all around the world even.
That sucks.
It was a very depressing and terrible year. And as soon as I could, I quit that job and I moved to San Diego, because during that year I applied to grad school in physics because I'd always liked physics and I'd actually done a little bit more of it. I wasn't a major in college, but I did a lot of the classes. And I was just like, I took a quantum mechanics class my senior year that I really liked. Just thought, hey, why don't I try for physics? And then got into San Diego. And so I moved there after a year. But that year itself sucked.
Did you at least like San Diego living there? Or?
I didn't like it initially, but after a couple of years, I really liked it a lot.
Yeah.
It was a big culture shock coming from the East Coast.
Yeah, I bet.
So it was like, it's like here. It's super sunny. People are very blonde and like fake friendly and stuff like that.
Yeah, it has a lot of similarities to where I grew up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, surprisingly. So at what point here, and I don't know how far along I am on the timeline right now, so you might need to help me out.
Well, this is supposed to go until the day I became a grump.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And so we just hit 22, and I'm currently 41.
Wow, so I have the most years to go through of anyone.
Yeah.
No offense, Brian.
No, I'm the oldest.
So I'm not exactly sure what happened in this time period of 20 to 30. I know that's pretty broad, but like at what point, obviously you had to have met Dan.
Yeah.
You had to start a Ninja Sex Party. What was this gap here? Because this is around the gap that I don't know anything about your life.
Well, it's a pretty simple answer for most of that. I was in grad school.
The whole time.
I went to UCSD, got a PhD in theoretical physics, and that was from 98 to 2004. And so I would have been 29 when I graduated.
Jesus, I would have been just graduating high school.
Yeah. You are younger than I am.
That is true. One whole Game Grumps fan.
I know.
Still gonna hold on to that one.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did 6 years in grad school, and there I was just basically in San Diego working on my PhD.
Wow.
The thing that's relevant there, though, maybe to this conversation, is that's where I started doing comedy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's where I started doing improv.
Were you already rolling back a little bit? Were you a bit of a class clown at any point, or were you just kind of you're a nervous kid?
I wasn't nervous. I just wasn't like I wasn't a class clown. I was. I've always had a very kind of dry and sarcastic sense of humor.
I don't believe it.
So I know it's a shock, right? So I was, and I was very academically focused, right? So I didn't want to disrupt the classes.
Right.
I had no instinct to it. Just liked the classes too much. It was too interesting. But I would, I'd write stupid little poems to exchange with my friends, or I don't even know, write sarcastic essays about stuff and whatever. But no, I never actually did any comedy, in any form you might call it that, until probably 2001, 2002, something like that.
What made you feel that you really had a calling to comedy? Like
nothing. It was nothing? Just I had a friend of mine from college. His name was Adam Bloom, who was doing improv in New York. And one time I was back home visiting, and I was hanging out with him. And I was just like, oh, man, that looks really fun. He's like, yeah, fine. I bet they have classes in San Diego. You should look it up.
Great.
And at that time, I was just needed something else to do other than physics. Like I'd been kind of doing physics for a while. This is deep into my grad school career at that point. Right. And I was like, oh, I'll look for local improv classes. And so I signed up and then just found out that I really enjoyed it. So I kept doing it.
That's awesome. That's super cool. So you got into improv like in your mid-20s, you'd say?
Late. I'd say, well, it depends what mid or late mean, but I'd say I was maybe 27 or so.
All right.
When I got into improv. Definitely not earlier than 26.
Oh, interesting.
And there was a time, San Diego was actually a great town for that because there was a very good local group, San Diego Theater Sports, which doesn't exist in that form anymore. I don't even know if there is a theater sports in San Diego right now. But it was great for me because it wasn't super like if you do improv in New York or here, there's a lot of people who want to make it in comedy and are super competitive and kind of aggressive about it. Generally, people are awesome, but it's like if you do improv at UCB in New York, like there are people there trying to get cast on SNL for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
And nobody in San Diego, like people who wanted to be professionals, but nobody was like an asshole about it. Everyone was really cool and interesting and sort of laid back. So I think it was a great place to start doing improv because it was, I didn't feel bad because I had started relatively late compared to many people that do it. I actually made some good friends through it and it was a lot of fun. So I'm glad I started it there as opposed to like, New York or LA or something.
So correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm not sure what year this happened, but your wife, Rachel, didn't you meet her in some sort of improv scenario?
Yeah. So what happened was after I got my PhD,
right?
So I wanted to stay on the academic track, which means I was trying to be a professor. So I applied for postdocs. So the standard thing in my field anyway is that you get your PhD and then you do some like fixed term research only positions after that, and then hopefully get a faculty job. And so what I had always been expecting, what I was told is that generally people do 2-3-year postdocs after the PhD.
Sure.
And so I was lucky that when I was in grad school, I had some pretty high profile results so I could get a really good postdoc. And I had a lot of offers, but ultimately I went to MIT, to the Center for Theoretical Physics. And while I was in Boston, I kept doing improv, and there were two main clubs I worked at. One was called Improv Asylum, and one was called Improv Boston. And at Improv Asylum, I played music there, and actually was the music director for a couple of years. Right. And when I was there, I was playing music, and she was acting. And so we met because I was the musical director. Well, we met through Improv Asylum, but before too long, I was the musical director for the cast that she was a part of. So, but she also did stuff in Improv Boston too. So we did a lot of improv stuff together in Boston.
So where does this put you now in age when you're meeting Rachel?
So I was 29 when I moved to Boston.
Okay.
And then I was there for 3 years in MIT.
So you're 32 at this point?
32.
Okay, so you're 32 at this point. So I'm trying to figure out here, like in the timeline, where was the shimmer of what NSP is? Where did that come in? How old were you being when this came about?
That happened next. I was 34.
So you're 34 when that started.
Yeah. Okay. So what happened was after MIT, I applied for faculty jobs but didn't get any. In part because I was at MIT during the. Was that true? No, sorry. I applied for faculty jobs but didn't get any just because I was young and relatively inexperienced. And then got another postdoc, a really good postdoc at this place called the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, which is like, there are many, high profile places, but this is like one of those like dream job scenarios because it's the place that Einstein was, A lot of other famous physicists. Oppenheimer was there. Dirac, I was not a faculty member there, but did a lot of stuff at the institute. Von Neumann was there. All these like huge names in physics. Freeman Dyson, who's still a faculty member there. So I got offered that job and took it. So we moved to suburban New Jersey, not super close, but not super far from where I grew up. So maybe like half an hour, maybe a little bit more, maybe closer to an hour from Pompton Lakes. So we lived, the job was in Princeton, not affiliated with Princeton University, but a separate institute in Princeton. But I wanted to live closer to Manhattan so that we could go in and do comedy and stuff. So we actually lived in this little town called Metuchen, which is halfway in between Princeton and Manhattan, roughly speaking, at least on a train line. And so I was in suburban New Jersey. We were in suburban New Jersey. We got married right after we moved to New Jersey. So we got married in 2007, which was like, let's see. So I would have been, 32. And Rachel actually turned 30 the day after we got married.
Wow.
Yeah.
Aw.
So, and then she was like, oh yeah, I got it in under the wire. Got married just before I was 30. And I didn't even, apparently to some girls, that's a thing.
That's a thing, yeah.
And Rachel, it's not a thing to her, but she knew it was a thing to other women.
Yeah.
So anyway, while we were in New Jersey, I was doing stuff in New York at a couple theaters there. And then I was coaching a musical comedy group. I kept doing music and I was doing all sorts of stuff, just trying to figure out what to do in New York. And New York was a lot less hospitable to, people coming in and doing stuff. Boston was super friendly, actually. Boston was great. Right. But New York, everyone, there's a ton of people doing stuff. Everyone wants to make it big. And so it was sort of hard to just get stuff rolling. But I took some musical improv classes and started teaching it. And in one of my classes was this girl, Julie, who introduced me to Dan. And so that was the connection. It was it was an independent thing.
Right.
Like some people say it was through, like if you look on Wikipedia, it says was at UCB or something like that. We were both doing stuff at UCB, but this thing was totally independent.
Right. It wasn't connected at all.
It was in that vague circle of improvisers.
So
but not
is this around the time that you got the legendary the email from Dan where you're just like, who's this gangly stoner, basically, right?
Yep, exactly. It was, I think it started, hey bro.
Yeah.
I've never written an email in my life that started with hey bro.
Yeah.
But at the time I was like, my philosophy with this stuff has always been like, never just write somebody off before you meet them. You gotta
absolutely, like,
I was like, hey, who is this guy? He was super friendly on the email.
A little too friendly, if you know what I mean.
But that's what I was looking for. Wink.
Wink.
And yeah, I was just like, hey, I want to give this guy a chance because I'm not doing much else, I'm doing physics and I'm married and, Rachel's doing stuff. And it's like, hey, let's meet and hang out. And if it sucks, it sucks. Then we never see each other again. And if it's fun, it's fun. And so,
little did you know?
Yeah, exactly. So I forget I believe someone can correct me on this, but I think that was February 18th, 2009.
Okay.
Maybe February 16th, 2009.
All right. Which is about, I discovered you guys around, I'm going to say 2010 is when I discovered you guys.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Because you saw, what was the first video you saw?
I saw
We Were Gay?
If You Were Gay. No, actually, I saw, you have to correct me on the title of it. All I Want to Do Is Dance.
I Just Want to Dance.
I Just Want to Dance. That's the one.
That was our first video. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that first.
That makes sense.
And
that was October 2009.
Yeah, okay. And I saw that in 2010, and then I saw If We Were Gay was the one that really sold me on you guys, and that was I would have seen that in 2010. You guys had 1,000 subscribers when I found you.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Which to us, we were like, oh my God, 1,000 subscribers.
That's
Holy
insane.
shit.
And I remember showing it to Aaron and being like, check out these guys.
Yeah.
Like they got their following is tiny. But their stuff is so good. And then
thank you.
And that's
the reason I'm here today.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. No, for real. Like without you,
that's
I don't think
funny to think about. Wow.
Yeah. So we just started, like Danny and I. So we met. I believe, I'm pretty sure this is right. I went over to his apartment, which was this it was sort of a loft thing where there was, the thing I remember about it was that it was unclear how many people were living there. It was like it was one big room with a couple like tiny bedrooms off the side of it. This place called the McKibben Lofts in I think it's in Bushwick, or near Bushwick anyway. And so I walk in, this like big like warehouse has been converted to lofts, and I'm like, oh, and they had a dog. Some dude was there, and he had a dog, and the dog's name was Smokey, because it was just like nothing but stoners and like artists and actors and stuff, which I thought was great. I mean, I don't have a problem with any of that. But I was like, oh my God, I'm in this like weird loft, and this guy has a dog named Smokey. And I was like, and I talked to Danny, I'm like, how many people live here? He's like, I don't know, like somewhere between 15 and 20, I think.
This is the
like,
commune area that he was living in at the time.
like it just, I mean, it was a super shitty apartment, but the rent was crazy cheap. And we hung out. I brought my keyboard. We jammed a little, and he told me he had the idea for NSP. And I was like, yeah, cool, I'm down. I mean, I just do whatever. And then we started writing stuff, and we met a few more times, and then we just kept it going. Initially, we thought of ourselves definitely more as a live act. Like we started he booked us, I'm sure he booked us our first show, which that actually might have been at UCB.
Wow.
I can't remember. It was on some showcase where they had a bunch of different acts. I can't even remember.
Funny.
And I'm 99% sure we played Accept My Shaft at that show. We used to play that all the time at our live shows.
I remember this is kind of jumping forward a bit, but I remember our friend Katie mentioned to us that she knew someone that used to know Dan, or was like used to teach Dan in some capacity. I don't actually know the specifics. As he said to Katie, he was like, did you know that Dan's like stoner band is like really big now? And he was like, and Katie's like, what? Yeah. And he's like, yeah, I saw some people dressed as them for Halloween. I was like,
that's awesome.
How crazy is that? Like to think,
so weird.
Like people in New York were seeing NSP Halloween costumes, like walking around.
It's unbelievable, dude.
So weird.
I can't believe that anyone knows who we are. No, it's
fucking wild.
It's incredible. Because I mean, you know, like almost everybody, we started out from nothing. We're literally two guys in a shitty apartment just trying to do some funny stuff. And now, you know, it's turned into everything it's turned into, which is amazing. And that's, you know, we put a lot of hard work into it, but that's largely thanks to Grumps too, right? So yeah, we spent a while just like, you know, gigging, writing stuff. And then we hadn't been doing it, you know, probably more than 6 months or so. And we were like, oh, we should make a YouTube video because it seems like a good way to get our name out there. And so we didn't even know like what we were doing. So, you know, I have no video editing or directing skills, neither does Danny. So we needed to find a director. We saw a funny video, like, by this woman, Adira Amram, who I think is hilarious. She had this song called Mom Song about smoking pot with your mom. And the guy who directed it was this dude, Jim Turner.
Right, Jim Turner was one of your first directors.
He was our first director, yeah. We worked with Jim for our first, probably like 10 videos or something like that.
I remember seeing his name.
He's the best. I mean, he was a super talented guy. He like had a price we could afford, which is to say, I mean, that's not to say it was low quality. It wasn't. He was just, you know, an independent guy who was not charging like crazy high rates. And he was the perfect fit for us. Just a super, super cool guy. I mean, I love him. He's a complete sweetheart. And he's a great director and just down for anything. You know, he was, without Jim, NSP would not be what it is today either. Like he's, you know, we don't work with him anymore because we're out here now and we are not in the same place, but I loved working with Jim.
Trying to put a face to the name. Was he the gentleman that when you did the balls and dicks and balls and you do the spin around when Dan leads the camera, and was he
he's one of those guys there.
He's one of the guys in that shot. I remember there's like a bunch of cast and crew there. I was like, it's gotta be, he's one of them has to be the director.
Yep. I think I'm 90% sure he's in that shot. It'd be crazy if he wasn't.
All right.
But yeah, I love Jim, and he did great stuff for and with us.
Right.
I mean, he directed If We Were Gay, he directed Dinosaur Laser Fight, you know, all those early NSP, The Decision, which was our first, like, to call it a hit is probably a misnomer, but that's the first one we did. That was our second video. That's the first one we did that got any attention, really.
Right. So,
but yeah, that was all Jim.
So obviously this is leading up to Grumps. We're still kind of in early NSP days. so naturally, you know, like at this point, coming around this point, you know, I'm already on Grumps. Dan is already on Grumps, but you weren't. So technically, we can keep talking.
Right.
You only.
Well, there's like several years here where, where I was still doing physics, right?
Oh, that's correct. Yeah, right.
So the big thing that happened there, of course, is so I was still on the academic track,
right?
And I was very upfront with Danny about this when we started NSP. I was like, look, dude, I got to tell you, I apply, you know, it's very likely I'm going to have to move away from New York. It was like a year after we started NSP because my gig at the Institute for Advanced Study was up in 2010 in the, at the end of summer. And so when we started, I basically had a ticking clock to when I'd have to leave New York. And the next job I got was another postdoc in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And so I moved there in I guess, fall, like August, September 2010, but kept coming back to New York to film with Danny because Rachel was still in New York. Actually, Rachel did a little stint. She did 6 months on a cruise boat doing improv. Rachel is, by the way, the best improviser I've ever seen.
She's very good. I've seen her teach classes here and stuff, and she's phenomenal.
Yeah, as a performer, she's like I tell people quite honestly, she's the funniest person I know. She is hilarious.
Yeah.
She really is a comedic genius. So she stayed in New York because she had a job that she was working there. So she did comedy on a boat for the bit, came back to New York to her job that she had been working at. Right. And I bounced back and forth from Michigan to New York. I did that for a year, and then all the while applying for faculty jobs still, but not getting anything.
Right.
Then applied. I'd heard some noises that maybe Harvard was interested in me as a postdoc. Applied there, got that. So after a year in Michigan, I moved to Boston again for a year.
God.
Rachel stayed in New York. I bounced back and forth between Boston and New York, all the while doing stuff with Danny, you know, keeping NSP alive, just filming more and more stuff. And I actually have a very clear memory of coming back from Michigan to do If We Were Gay.
Wow.
Yeah. And then the big thing that happened is right after I got the Harvard job, not after I moved, but right after I got offered the job, I got offered a faculty job in London.
Right. And this is where things, and I remember Dan's mentality on that was like, oh man, this is going to be such a kick in the nuts for NSP. But if I remember correctly, you guys were more productive than you've ever been when you were living in London, which was a little alarming to say the least.
We were, but that was we both I think I was more optimistic about it than he was because he'd been through another band that I think broke up I think Sky Hill broke up when the other guy moved away or something like that.
Yeah.
So he had been through this before and he was like not optimistic. I was hoping we could keep it together, but of course I didn't know. And I have a very clear memory of calling Danny. You know, when I got offered the job, I was in London because I just interviewed and they gave it to me the next day. And I have a very clear memory. I called Rachel, of course, to tell her. I called one of my academic mentors and talked to him about, you know, like job stuff, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And then I called Danny and I have a very clear memory of like, you know, talking to him on the phone and crying because it was like this huge thing. And I knew, you know, he was just, destroyed by, you know, what felt, I think, like a betrayal to him, right? Because this was a guy, we were building this thing. Clearly the momentum was in the right direction.
Right.
But I was moving to another country and I had to do it because it's, you know, I certainly don't regret making this decision in any sense. It's the thing I'd like getting a professorship job was something I'd been working for, you know, if you count the beginning of my, like when I first started grad school for like 14 years, 6 years of grad school, 8 years of postdoc. Like I'd been working for this my whole life and I was like, I have to take this job. Like I want to keep doing NSP, but I can't not take this job. It would just be stupid not to.
Right.
Of course I didn't say that to Danny, but it was this very emotional thing for both of us because my academic career was leading me finally like in a permanent different direction.
Right.
And it's like, okay, you know, if I'm moving to London permanently, because the way UK jobs work, most of them is you're tenured basically, or the equivalent of tenured when you walk through the door. So I was a permanent faculty member basically right away. I was in the UK forever, and he wasn't. So that was kind of possibly it for NSP. And so we had this very tough few months where it was like, where are we? It's kind of like, why are we even doing this anymore? I remember he had moved here to LA a few months before I moved to England. So he moved out here in like June, and I moved to England in September.
I remember, yeah.
And I have this very clear memory. He has no memory of this at all. I asked him of coming out here in July to visit him and, and write more songs and do stuff and try to keep it going. And I remember coming out here and seeing him, and it was like this total feeling of like, like when you have a friend that you don't live in the same city as. It's sort of like a long distance relationship. So you're dating someone. Have you ever been in a long distance relationship?
Well, me and Holly were talking, but we weren't technically dating. So
okay, so
we were kind of, we both wanted to, but yeah.
It's not going to be quite the same thing then. But I went through this because I was in a couple long distance relationships. It's like this thing where you're in a long distance relationship and you're living in a different city from your partner, and then you see each other again, and there's like this feeling of like, where are we going with this? There's sort of like this unspoken dread that hovers over it. Like, why are we putting up with this bullshit to, for what? And like that chemistry you had when you were in the same place just doesn't there anymore. That's what happened when I came out to see Danny. It was like, why are we doing this? I remember, at some point we were hanging out and he was like, so tell me why you're out here again. And I was just like, I really almost started to cry because I was like, I'm out here for us. Like, I'm out here for NSP to keep it going.
Brian.
Like, this is why I came out here. He thought I had, I don't know what he thought. I mean, maybe he thought I had some academic or physics reasons or something like that. But I specifically came out for a week just so we could do stuff. But like,
That's
he
sweet.
just wasn't, I think maybe I didn't communicate that clearly or something. I don't know what. I remember we went to see Steel Panther at the House of Blues.
Nice.
And we saw that show and we were like, oh man, someday, maybe like that'll be us.
Yep.
And so that was really hard. Those few months there, basically from when it was almost a year really, when I accepted the job in London to when I was there, which was like basically the year of, I guess 2012.
Right.
That was 2011.
2011. Yeah. Okay.
That was really tough.
Okay. Right.
And what happened when I moved to London is we started writing Starbomb songs.
I could have sworn it was 2012 because I was already.
You know what? You're right.
It was 2012 because I was already living in the United States at this point, so it has to be 2012.
It's 2012. You're right.
Yeah.
And so when I got to London, we were like, Aaron, we were talking about. Actually, I remember just before I moved to London, we wrote the Kirby rap song.
Yes.
Because Aaron wanted to do a rap. And we didn't even know Starbomb.
It wasn't Starbomb at the time.
Nope.
It was something like, Aaron wanted to do with puppets, and he kept nagging Holly to make all the puppets.
Yeah. And Danny, to me, he was just like, hey, Aaron wants to do a rap about Kirby.
I remember this.
And I remember writing the song before, like in the States, at Rachel's apartment in Brooklyn. And then when I moved to London, suddenly it was like, well, why are we just like, we like the song, which is now, that Kirby song is quite clearly the worst Starbomb song, like by a long shot. I'm none of us really like that song right now. Maybe I'm speaking for
nobody likes that song.
Nobody likes that song. And I'm not going to say it's a terrible song because I don't think it's a terrible song, but
it's in comparison. We did and could do a lot better. And then it was like, well, fuck it. Let's do a whole album of this. Like, let's make it a thing. Why are we just doing one song? And we had a clock, like we wanted to release it Christmas 2013. And then, we were like, okay, well, let's just write jams and make it happen. And then during that year, Danny joined Grumps. Yep.
Right.
2012.
2013.
Was it 2013?
Yeah.
Oh, you are correct. It was 2013. You were absolutely correct. It was 2013.
Yeah.
Yep.
So while
2012 is when it started with John. That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he joined like that June, I think, in 2013. And then it became, we'd been writing songs throughout, but then it became like, oh, the album that the two Game Grumps are doing.
Yep.
And then that, I think, that obviously became a whole like a whole added thing for that. So that really kept us on the clock. And once we had, I'm sure I'm getting this slightly wrong, but this is how I remember it. Once we had that like momentum, then it was like, okay. And I'd been coming back to the States to do NSP stuff, and we were filming videos regularly and everything like that, or as regularly as NSP does. Then we just kept NSP going along with that. And then we put out the Starbomb album, and it was like this huge thing. It did really well. And then we're like, oh, well, we should do that again.
Yeah, shit.
So let's see. I guess also that year, the second NSP album came out 2013 as well, but before Danny joined Game Grumps.
Yes.
Because I think Strawberries and Cream came out like March or April.
Yes,
I think
April.
April.
Come out a little bit before. That is
I think
correct.
it was April 2013. Then first Starbomb came out December 2013. And so, because I remember coming back to the States to do physics stuff, actually being in Southern California here and being in San Diego.
Yeah.
And, having to, from a physics office I was staying in San Diego, like put the album on iTunes and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
So yeah, and that album, again, we were very happy with it, but it didn't do very well as an album because nobody knew who we were. I think it got to number 9 on the comedy charts or something like that.
Right.
Which we were super happy with. It charted, but it didn't sell that many copies.
Right.
But then Danny joined Game Grumps and everything kind of went nuts.
It does sound like that is the case. So when Danny joined Game Grumps, that elevated both your like musical careers
sure.
because it put a spotlight on both of you as individuals. And definitely it's Dan making figures
he
at
poked
you
his
through the
stupid
window.
face in the mirror, and then I flipped him off and he left.
Oh, great. Yeah. So I guess we're coming up now. So what you joined Game Grumps, was it this year or last? I'm trying to remember.
Well, it was last calendar year. Because I started as a social media dude. And
we hadn't announced you yet. Like you were just kind of.
Right. It was sort of, I think people knew I was hanging out here, but I don't think they knew I was like working here. So yeah, I took over the social media in July. It was July 1st. We moved back to the States. That's when I started here.
Right.
And then I debuted, which that was a whole other fucking thing. Like, just making the decision to leave academics.
Right, of course.
Like,
that's a huge deal.
Some of the most stressful months of my life were that decision to, give up a permanent job to take a chance on NSP and Grumps. And
academically, you've been working on towards your entire,
at that point, it was 20 years of my life and my entire professional life.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating, I was still supposed to be teaching classes. I still was teaching classes and everything. But, at that point we had Audrey, who was born in 2014. And it was like, am I really going to uproot my life, my wife's life, and my daughter's life to take a chance on something that sounds kind of nuts, right? That is a YouTube channel, albeit a very, very popular channel, Game Grumps, and hope that, my projects, NSP and Starbomb, keep doing well. That was a horrible, it's a dream scenario, right? Like, I mean, working here is literally a dream job for many people, but making the choice to jump into that was by no means an easy thing. So I'm sure, if I were 20 years younger and I was like, 20 rather than 40, it would have been like, yeah, of course, fucking do it. Like, no brainer. But, at that point in my life, it was actually a very hard decision to make. And so I spent months agonizing over it. And, I think like Aaron was super generous to even offer to hire me in the first place. And so there was a natural role for me to fill here as social media person. And eventually after, talking over with Rachel, who did not really want to leave London, who was very skeptical of Los Angeles. Eventually we decided, we were like, look, if we don't do this, and specifically, I mean, let's not put too fine a point on it. If I don't do this, I will regret it forever. That's really what it came down to, is like, look, this is in many ways the chance of a lifetime. And I don't want in 20 years to look back on this opportunity as something I could have done, but didn't, and regret. So with Rachel's very generous support, we moved from London. I quit my job. Wow. All my fucking colleagues thought I was
Going crazy.
No, they were like, what? I mean, some of them knew about NSP, some of them didn't. But they were just like, what are you doing? You know, sorry, that frames it wrong. People were very supportive, but they were just like, a lot of them were like, well, we don't get it, but if you got to do it, you got to do it.
Right.
A couple of people were like, what the hell are you doing? But not really that many. And none of my, like, all my good friends knew about NSP and could see where it was going anyway. So yeah, we moved here, and then I started at Game Grumps.
So pretty much you were a highly respected academic, and then you became a ninja who dances around, sings about dicks.
Technically, my partner sings about dicks.
Oh, that's true. You just play the song.
Ninja Brian don't dance, bro.
You got a little shuffle, do you?
I'm not saying I don't have moves. I'm not saying Brian Weck doesn't have moves. I got nothing but moves. I got moves for days. I'm saying Ninja Brian, a character I play, doesn't dance.
That's true.
He could if he wanted to. Ninja Brian can do anything.
I don't doubt that. Well, do you have anything else you wanted to add, Brian?
No, except I'm grateful to all the fans for being there and being supportive and watching NSP, Starbomb, and Grumps videos, and I'm eternally grateful to Rachel and to a lesser extent Audrey, who just kind of sits there and is cute. But to Rachel for really being game to make this all happen.
Nice, dude.
So I love her.
Dope as fuck.
Thanks, bro.